Hello friends, welcome back. Let us continue our discussion with emotions and moods. We talked about in our previous discussion about different models of emotional intelligence. Today I will talk about another aspect of emotions, that is emotion regulation. As the term implies, how to regulate, identify and modify our emotions. We are sad, we need to cheer up ourselves. We feel negative, we need to find different ways out to feel positive. And how we feel positive, we sometimes do journaling, sometimes we tend to vent our frustrations, anger and negative emotions to other person who is able to listen to us with full patience, and we find solutions to our grievances or problems. It can be about identifying, filtering the stimulus in the environment which affect us negatively and how we can detach ourselves from those stimulus. So, emotion regulation is a very broad term which has only one focus, with understanding that how to regulate, identify and modify our emotions whenever we are upset or we are in low mood. So, emotional regulation talks about strategies to change your emotions, which includes thinking about more pleasant things, suppressing negative feelings, distracting oneself from negative situations or factors, and reappraising the situations or engaging in relaxation techniques. That is how, just now I mentioned, these are the practical techniques which can help us to regulate our emotions in a way that we evolve with positivity or we evolve with positive thought process. Point is that how significantly and lucidly we can regulate our emotions even in the workplace and how we can do it. So, this discussion is pertained, particularly specifically inclined towards emotional regulation at workplaces, and we will discuss about certain techniques that will help us to regulate our emotions. The first technique is emotional suppression, cognitive appraisal, social sharing or venting, and mindfulness. We will go more into detail of these concepts. The first technique is emotional suppression or suppressing initial emotional response to situations. This is about facilitating practical thinking in short term. For instance, whenever we are exposed to any negative event, we would just elicit a distressed emotional reaction during that crisis, and that will aggravate our negative emotions. That is so obvious. But if we engage in the technique of emotional separation, which is used in any critical situation, it appears to help an individual recover from the event emotionally. And when we are suppressing, it is about an everyday emotion regulation technique that can take a toll on mental ability, emotional ability, health and relationships. So, the point is that when we are engaging in a technique of emotional suppression or suppressing initial emotional responses to situations even in our daily life, it will help us to maintain our mental health, develop more ability to be less impulsive, and at the same time we are more capable to maintain and establish interpersonal relationship, because separation is something that will help us to curb our negative reactions to any negative event or situation. So, unless we are truly in crisis, acknowledging rather than suppressing our emotional responses to situations and re-evaluating events even after they occur to yield the best outcomes. So, the best outcome is that whenever we are identifying, modifying our emotion in any critical situation, then the outcome is definitely going to be advantageous for us only. The other is cognitive reappraisal of framing our outlook. This is another technique where in any emotional situation, we regulate our emotions based on identifying the factors which we cannot control, which are leading to stress, and we tend to detach themselves from those factors. So, the results suggest based on cognitive reappraisal is that it may allow people to change their emotional responses even when the subject matter is as highly emotionally charged. So, whenever we are appraising any negative situation, now here appraisal means to identify, understand the situation to an extent that to what extent what the situation is actually help us to move forward or to detach, or to what extent controlling emotion will help us to overcome that critical situation. This is about cognitive reappraisal or reframing. So, we are reframing our understanding about the critical event or any negative situation that has aroused in particular moment. So, this is one way to regulate our emotions. The other is social sharing or venting. It is about that we are bottled up. We have so much of negative emotions in us that we want to share, we want to vent out to the person who can listen to us or who can share our grievances, and then we feel positive or calm and relaxed. So, this is another technique of social sharing or venting, which shows that the open expressions of emotions can help individuals to regulate their emotion as opposed to keeping those emotions bottled up. Bottled up means that you are just absorbing all the negative emotions within yourself and you find difficulty even to keep inside. There has to be a channel that how to release those negative emotions, and it is only possible through social sharing. So, social sharing can reduce anger, frustrations when people can talk about the bad situation and they feel more calm and composed. But yes, caution must be exercised through, because expressing your frustration also affects the other person. So, social sharing should not be taking advantage of one's own benefit. One should do sharing of emotions so that it should not impact the other person negatively at the other end. Moreover, the another aspect of this technique is that what if the other person is not a good listener, then how the person will feel. Now, in the such circumstances, when the person is a poor listener, then it can also have detrimental effect on the person itself, because the situation will become more worse. So, this is about that the person to whom venting is being done should be a good listener, else the person who is emotionally charged will be in a more worse situation. Therefore, if we are going to vent to a co-worker, we need to choose someone who will respond sympathetically, while venting to the perceived offender rarely improves things and can result in heightening negative emotions. So, this is the positive and negative aspect of any emotional regulation technique, that the person has to be, or the co-worker has to be a good listener, and at the same time he should have patience and he should be empathetic or sympathetic to understand the other person's emotions. And the final technique, which is trending technique, is mindfulness. It is about being fully in the present situation, aware of the present situation, of the thoughts and feelings that one is going through, but at the same time the person is not getting trapped in that situation. The more you are aware of the situation, the more the person is aware of his own situation. That means it is about being fully present in the moment, aware of our thoughts and feelings without getting caught up in them. That is mindfulness. We know we are feeling bad, but just keeping this to oneself and not expressing that feeling to the other person or the situation is termed as mindfulness. Researchers have suggested that mindfulness can slow aging, it can bolster test performance and aid in facilitating neuroplasticity, that is producing actual changes in the brain. Neuroplasticity is another term which is related to mindfulness. It is about whenever a person is aware of the situation, whenever the person is aware of his own emotions, then the person is able to use his brain in that moment, that how I have to give that response or reaction to the situation. So, that it will not be a reaction, it will basically a response, because you are using your intellect to understand your own emotion and the situation to actually build your own right response to the situation. This is neuroplasticity, that is producing actual changes in the brain, not getting trapped by the real response that has come to your mind. It is about modifying your reaction. So, the key mechanism for its effectiveness can be found in being able to separate oneself from the moment, decrease the use of automatic thought, that is a automatic emotion or thought that comes to you, and increase awareness of one's own body. And initial research on mindfulness in Germany and Netherlands suggests that it reduces emotional exhaustion in the workplace and improves job satisfaction by causing employees to engage in surface acting. So, this is the advantage of being mindful at workplaces, especially in crisis, when the person is highly emotionally triggered or charged, and how the person uses his brain to produce the right emotion in order to control the situation. So, this will lead to less emotional exhaustion, more job satisfaction, and engage in surface acting. It is about surface acting, means only giving the desirable response to that any critical situation. At the same time, mindfulness can also lead to improved job performance, work-life balance and sleep quality, as well as reduced turnover intentions, retaliatory behaviors and counterproductive work behaviors. The more the person is engaging in neuroplasticity, that is finding the right pattern of behavior while using your intellect and understanding the situation, the more positive outcomes will be evolved. Okay. What are the emotional regulation influences and outcomes? What are the outcomes when the person is able to regulate his emotions? The first is that the person is able to improve his task performance for some jobs and engage in positive behaviors such as organizational citizenship behaviors. The person can engage in helping the co-workers to finish their tasks. They are more active in the political life of the organization and formulating policies and procedures for the improvement of the organization and performances, while being more conscious about their performance and desirable behaviors that should be performed, that will help them to improve. The other outcome is that it has been observed in researches that the neurotic personality will find lot of trouble in regulating his emotions. Under such circumstances, it becomes difficult to maintain higher levels of self-esteem for any individual who is facing any crisis, and they are likely to improve their moods, and perhaps because they are less likely than others to feel that they deserve to be in good mood. So, the point is that any neurotic personality will find lot of difficulty in regulating their mood. The other is diversity in work group increases the likelihood that you will regulate your emotions, which is but obvious that when there is more diversity in the workplaces, people will take utmost care to respond and interact with people with different backgrounds in order to accommodate with their co-workers easily. For example, younger employees are likely to regulate their emotions when their work groups include older members. This is so obvious that younger members will be more conscious to interact with the older members in the organizations. For another advantage is that racial diversity also has an effect. If diversity is low, the minority employees will engage in emotion regulation, perhaps to fit in with the majority employees, because they will have to make more adjustments with the majority of the employees with other racial backgrounds. So, this will help them, not only people with minority racial background, but people or employees with majority in racial background also have to regulate their emotions towards the other employees. Perhaps they integrate himself or himself with the whole group. So, this will lead to more integration and solidarity. So, these findings suggest a beneficial outcome of diversity may cause us to regulate our emotions more consciously and effectively, no matter whether it is majority or minority of racial backgrounds. But when diversity is there, people will make efforts to accommodate each other and work effectively. The other is regulating emotions suggests that there is a downside to trying to change the way you feel. This is another drawback, that sometimes when the person is too much engaged or involved in changing their emotions, then it leads to emotional labor. That is an effort that leads to exhaustion, and the person finds difficulty in maintaining a composure where the person is finding space to release his emotions and at the same time not feeling exhausted, because too much of regulating emotions will also lead to emotional exhaustion and labor. The other is that sometimes attempt to change an emotion actually make the emotion stronger. For example, trying to talk to yourself, being afraid can make you focus more on what scares you, which makes you more afraid. Another perspective is that avoiding negative emotional experiences is less likely to lead to positive moods than thus seeking out positive emotional experiences. For example, you are likely to experience a positive mood if you have a pleasant conversation with a friend than if you avoid an unpleasant conversation with a hostile co-worker. So, one has to find sources that where the person can find the best fit to reduce his negative emotions and enhance his moods towards more positivity. So, this is an emotional regulation technique where the person has to make efforts to engage first himself emotionally and then engaging emotionally to the outside world, where there can be a source to balance their or converting their negative emotions to positive emotions. Right. So, this is about emotional regulation and its techniques, which we have talked in terms of emotional suppression, cognitive appraisal, social sharing and mindfulness. Apart from that, I will also talk about in terms of questionnaire that how organizations use different kind of psychometric tests to identify the emotional aspects of employees and how to find best fit for a persons with the organization and the job. So, this is a self report developed by Schutt for assessing emotional intelligence. So, these are the items which is a 5-point scale, and every employee can rate what he feels based on this 5-point scale, that is from strongly disagree to strongly agree, and the scale has 33 items. Now, the point is that based on the manual, when the scoring is done, certain items are negatively scored items in order to understand the reason of bias, and there is appropriateness and there is reduced bias in the responses, right. So, here special instructions are being given for certain items. For example, item number 5, 28 and 33 are a reverse coded scales. That means, if they have scored 1, then the score will be 5 or vice versa. So, such kind of scales do exist in this area of organizational behavior. These are standardized and structured questionnaires which can be used for employees in order to assess, modify and identify new patterns of emotions, converting their negative emotions to the positive emotions. So, this is just for your understanding that how OB professionals work on emotions of employees at workplaces or in organizations. So, we are through with this unit. We will start with another unit in the next session. Thank you so much.